Episode 29 of the Understable podcast. This week we have a rather accomplished guest with us. Born in Hollywood but currently residing in Justin, Texas. His accomplishments include 84 career wins, 17 world, national, and distance titles, and the founder of the Scott Stokely method. Scott, welcome to the Understable podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm going to jump in with a quick correction, though. We don't currently reside in Justin, Texas. We get our mail there, but we haven't been there in several years. We are permanently on the road. We have no storage unit. We have no home base, but you need to register your truck somewhere. So I'm a Texan by registration alone.
Okay. Well, I mean, that works. Yeah. So real quick, before we jump into this, Scott, I want to give you a chance to do a quick social media shout out. Um, yeah, tell us where our listeners can find you at, follow you, check out your videos, instruction, all that stuff.
Absolutely. So, my website is scottstokely.net. And if you spell it wrong or put in .com, doesn't matter. It's going to redirect to the right page. That's where you can get on my mailing list to get information about clinics, seminars, product releases, tour discs, all that stuff. But Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you just search for my name, I'll pop up on top.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump into this. And by all means, if I have anything that's inaccurate, please correct me or Brandon.
Well, I own the fact that I'm homeless, and I actually take a lot of pride in the fact that we've given away every single thing anything we couldn't take with us, we gave away or threw away. So I'm kind of preaching this minimalist lifestyle. So I don't want to give people the wrong idea. I think I'm secretly harboring a resonance.
Gotcha.
Cool. But that's all.
Cool. In 1985, you became the youngest player to make the finals at the Wintertime Open at Oak Grove. But your story doesn't start there. Let's back up a few years to 1976. How did you get your start in disc golf?
So I played my first round of Frisbee golf on the world's first Frisbee golf course, the world's first permanent Frisbee golf course, when it was the only course in the entire world. It was at Oak Grove Park in Pasadena. My dad had passed away when I was 7 years old, and my mom would take me to all the local parks in the area, like, any mom would do. And, there was a park with like a big merry-go-round. I know there was one that had the tallest swing set. There was one that had a Frisbee golf course. There's one that had baseball fields. So it wasn't unusual. It was just, of course, parks have different things in them to do. I played Frisbee golf. It didn't know that it was the only course in the world, that it was historic. Well, it wasn't historic then. But that was my start. I started at ground zero. The thing is I lived about 7 miles away. So even though I would go to the park occasionally, it was every, month or two or something like that. But when I was 11 years old, I went from living in a very, like middle-class, blue-collar neighborhood. My mom's business started going well, and she moved into a very affluent, white, rich, conservative, it's a rich Los Angeles neighborhood. And I didn't fit in there. This is when I was 11 years old. I didn't fit in. Like, it was like a John Hughes movie. I'm dating myself, but those 80s John Hughes movies about the rich kids, like that was my town. That wasn't an exaggeration. So I didn't have the name brand clothing, the name brand bicycle. Like I wasn't part of that community. But about 300 yards away was Oak Grove Park, the world's first Frisbee golf course. And it was filled with misfits and hippies and the occasional degenerate. But it was more my people, more the people that I grew up with that I could relate to. I didn't make a lot of friends as a kid. I ended up just going down to the Frisbee golf course every day. So from 8 to 11, I pretty much played every day.
That's awesome. I wish I had that opportunity when I was that age. And I wish I knew about disc golf back then, too.
Well, the thing was that I felt like I had been dealt the worst hand in the world. I don't know if you want to call this first world problems or white person problems or whatever name you want to give to it, because my big problem was my mom was making too much money and we were doing well. Like, cry me a river. But as a kid, I had nothing to compare it to. So all I knew is that I had a hard time making friends. I didn't realize that I was the luckiest kid in the world because of I always say, like, there were 500 million kids on planet Earth, and I lived closer to the world's first Frisbee golf course than any of them. If I had been several blocks away, I probably wouldn't have grown up playing Frisbee golf, right? So it was pure luck, but I didn't realize it at the time.
Isn't it funny how fate just kind of works out that way? You know, like it was destiny for you to be born there and be born by the world's first Frisbee golf course, and to kind of make that what you do for a living and make your mark playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine living in any other way. Like, I don't know what I would have done with my life if I wasn't doing Frisbee. I mean, Frisbee has been my life. I've taken some breaks from it for different reasons, to raise my daughter, and but yeah, I mean, it's my life, it's my family, it's my friends, it's my identity, it's my career, it's my legacy, it's my future. Like, this is my everything.
You mentioned a couple times in there that it was the first permanent disc golf course. Here in Dayton, we have roughly 40 courses within an hour, including the Idlewild. Were there any other options where you could go play Frisbee back then, or was it just that one park and one course?
Sure, there were. So by the time I was 11, there were about 75 courses in the world, most of them in the U.S. But there was Sylmar, La Mirada, Huntington Beach, and Whittier Narrows. So there were 5 courses, 18-hole courses in the Los Angeles area, and then some 9-holes popped up. So of the 75 courses, this was a mecca. Interestingly, Austin, I think, had 5 courses at that time. Peru, Indiana, completely random, had 4 courses when there was less than 100 courses in the country. And of course, there were places like in Detroit, Michigan, Rochester, New York. There were little hubs popping up, but there were entire states without courses. But as an 11-year-old, my option was the course I could walk to. So I guess in my world, in my bubble, there was one option.
So early on in your disc golf career, you had some mentors, including Joe Orsino, Mark Horn, Dan Stork-Roddick, and a few others. How did they influence your success as a disc golfer?
Well, the first thing they did is what every high-level athlete, and they were very high-level athletes, especially for that time, they influence any kid interested in that sport by doing things that you can't do. So, someone like, no one's ever heard of John Winterkorn, but I remember being an 11-year-old kid mesmerized by the fact that he could throw over the trees on hole 1 when that's not what players were throwing. They were throwing through the tunnel. And, influenced, because I would go home and dream about throwing that shot, and then I would try that shot and fail. So they all coached me in, like, just by being good. And then people like Joe Orsino and Jeff and Johnny Lissaman, more than any others, actually took me under their wings and then spent time coaching me, where we would actually work on putting. Joe Orsino, first and foremost, he taught me the sidearm, the X step, all the fundamental mechanics. But they all played a part. I mean, everybody, this isn't just disc golf. This is how I view life in general. But anytime someone has something that I want, I go to them and try to figure out how to get it. So, like, Steve Bentley could throw the big Anheuser shot on hole 5. That doesn't mean anything to anyone in the world. But to me, you couldn't throw an Anheuser on hole 5. By the way, with an AVR, just like we couldn't do that. He could. So it's like, well, what do you do? And I still remember the day he says, well, before I throw, I give my AVR a little bend. It makes it more understable. And I went, that's allowed? So, like, but that's what it was. I mean, you're a kid, you're a sponge. Kids are sponges for information. And so they all played their part.
What was it like back then throwing against guys like Ken Climo?
Throwing against Ken Climo was extremely frustrating. I bet you could ask Charles Barkley and Karl Malone what it was like. You probably could have asked at one point Peyton Manning what it was like to throw against Tom Brady. It sucked, to be honest. Like, it was the mountain that you're trying to climb that everyone's like dying during the ascent. I don't know, maybe it's like K2 or something like that before someone got to the top. Like, Ken didn't have a rival. I mean, people talk about all the time. They say, you know, was that my biggest rival? It's like, I think it would be disingenuous to say that Ken was my rival. Ken was better than all of us. And to say he had a rival, you know, I mean, people had their moments. Ron Russell had moments. Steve Valencia in the early 90s. I think Barry Schultz was the first real rival to come along where he actually started battling with Ken, and you didn't know who was going to win. It wasn't an upset when Barry won. It was just another top player won. So, yeah, it was awful. I mean, it was like, you know, I mean, it's, hey, you know, a silver medal's nice, but gold medals are nicer.
Appreciate your honesty there.
Yeah, absolutely. Along with the accomplishments I mentioned earlier in the intro, as far as like the setting the distance records and the longest sidearm throw to date at that time of 568 feet back in, I believe, 2001. Are there any accomplishments that you are still trying to check off before you officially retire from disc golf?
Yeah, I still haven't won Open Pro Worlds. I'd sure like to do that this year.
That's
That's the goal. I've said this, and like when I decided to go on tour, that if I show up at a tournament and I'm not playing to win, then I'm stealing that spot from someone else who wants to play to win. I don't care if it's a 950 rated player. If they're going out there to win the tournament and I'm not, or I don't think I can, I need to step aside and let them play. I don't deserve to be competing. So I'm always going to be competing to win, or else I'm not going to be out there. And, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I would love to shock the world and win Pro Worlds. That'd be that'd be the pinnacle. My competitive goal when I was younger was to win the World Distance Championships, to set the world distance record, and to win Pro Worlds. Those are always my primary goals. And I did the first two, and Pro Worlds I finished second twice, both times by about half a stroke around. So, you know, which doesn't really matter in the record books, you're number two. But so that was the one hump I never got over.
I think that's really everybody's goal when they step on the course, whether you're open or like myself, a rec player like Brandon, an advanced player. I think our goal is to try to win when we step on that course.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, the reality happens, and some of us, like myself, don't shoot very well, and we always choke in big moments. And I don't think I've finished above ninth ever in a tournament. So
Not yet.
Not yet. This year, though. So
yes.
Yep. No, I love that mentality. I've got this mentality when I play a tournament, and I've shared this with people, and it's almost, I don't know, I don't want to say it's like arrogant, but I've got this mentality where it's like, I step out on the course, and yes, I want to win. I step up and I look at my field and I go, man, all of these people paid to lose to me today. You know what I mean? I had that like savage mentality, and that really helps really drive me to like play my best and stuff like that. It's just that mentality that you had where you're going in there and you're playing to win. And I love how you worded that, how if you're not playing to win, then you don't deserve that spot in that tournament, that you shouldn't be there. I really like that mentality that you've got. Yeah.
And so I completely agree with your point too, is like the difference between a successful professional athlete and an asshole is their mouth, because both the successful professional athlete and the asshole are thinking, I'm going to beat all of you. None of you are as good as me. It's just that one of them opens his mouth and says those things. And that person I don't like. I don't like being around that person. I'll never be that person. But it's what goes through my head. You know, back in the 90s when I was, you know, at my most successful, I would pull into the parking lot and I would think to myself, holy cow, all these people are here to watch me play.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was arrogant or egotistical. I think that was the attitude of a winner. But I don't behave that way. You know, that's the difference. You can't, well, you can.
Right.
I just don't want to hang out with you.
Yeah, you can if you don't want to be liked.
But even the person that talks that way, they're not bad for disc golf, because they will attract some followers who love the bravado and the arrogance. and they will attract some people that don't like them, that are rooting against them, but they're going to tune in to root against you. Like, I have nothing against baby faces and heels in sports. That's good for sports. So just I don't knock those for I don't knock people for having whatever attitude they need to have on the course to, to a point. I mean, obviously you can't distract other players, but like, right. I don't have to like you, and I can still respect you and think that you're doing just fine being you.
Yeah.
I'll even take it a step further from a marketing perspective. There's an old pro wrestling expression, which is, if people love you or they hate you, you'll put butts in the seats. If they're indifferent to you, you are not drawing money. And if you're not drawing money, it's very hard to make money. So players that do things to draw attention to themselves because they're looking out for themselves and their brand, I have no problem with that, even if it's not the way I would approach it.
Right. So kind of shifting gears, you were touring from 1992 to 2000. How much different was touring back then and compared to now?
Yeah, so it's oh my God. So what was it like, Led Zeppelin, when you used to be a garage band on tour? Like, was it different? Right? Yeah, it's like everything about it. So first off, you at many tournaments, first place would not cover your airfare. So you had to win a tournament just for your airfare to only cost $65, never mind food and stuff. Nobody stayed at hotels. None of us had any money. None of the touring players stayed at hotels. We always crashed at people's houses. That was just mandatory. It was expected. It would be offensive to go to get a hotel and not stay at one of the players' houses. Most of those tournaments did not have pre-registration. Well, there's no internet, so you would have had to like clip something out of the magazine and mail it in. But the culture was not, tournaments didn't fill. Always. Sometimes they filled. No pre-registration. You showed up the morning to the tournament and entered. By the way, that occasionally would lead to tournaments that were popular having sixums or sevensomes. Because you couldn't, if there was no pre-registration, you can't turn away some player that just drove 4 hours. So there were tournaments that would finish in the dark. The culture of, like, it's not that there weren't rules and the rules of the game weren't followed, but rules of etiquette might not have been as followed. Like, especially like back in the 80s, people yelling, kicking their bags, throwing their discs, that was not uncommon. It was frowned upon, but not penalized. Mind games, playing psychological games on your opponents was almost considered by some players to be gamemanship. It was very Wild West. Like I've heard stories about players stepping up to make important putts. I won't name names, but people we've heard of, they would step up to make important putts. And as they're stepping up, their opponent would walk up to them and say, "So when you putt, do you exhale or inhale when you're releasing?"
Oh, wow.
Like, are you kidding me? But and then if someone happened to rustle some leaves behind you when you're putting, it's like, no, none of this was considered okay. There were certainly players that didn't do this. There were plenty of professional players. You would never see Steve Weisskopf from Dayton ever play a mind game. That guy, most professional player on tour. So there were many Steve Weisskopfs out there, Johnny Siases and people like that. But there were also, the other side existed as well. So it was very Wild West. I've been to tournaments where there was PDGA tournaments and I'll add a couple more little details. So first off, the tournament was scheduled at a certain time in the morning, but really when it started is when the tournament director showed up. That happened multiple times. If the tournament director had scorecards, you're like, holy cow, this is a professional tournament. There were tournaments where they're like, hey, who has paper? PDGA tournaments, right?
Wow.
There were tournaments where, so there was no real players pack. And a lot of times there wouldn't necessarily even be trophies or just really cheap trophies. Everybody played one division, which was pro. There was no amateur divisions. And if 50 players showed up and paid $30 a piece, you have a pool of $1,500 that's supposed to be given out on Sunday. And there were tournaments, not once, multiple tournaments where there would only be $900 in prize money given out on Sunday instead of $1,500. And the reason why is because the tournament director and his friends partied all weekend, and $900 is what was left. And the thing about it is, like, you weren't happy about it. Obviously, you're like, this sucks. But it's not like you wouldn't invite the TD to your tournament next week. It's not like you wouldn't come back next year. Like, you were so happy that anybody was running a Frisbee tournament that you would complain about it, you'd bitch about it, and then you'd show up next year for their next tournament. So it was rough. The tournament directors didn't have anybody to model after, because in most of these towns, like, the first person to run tournaments in Dayton they didn't, by definition, didn't have anybody else in Dayton showing them how to run a tournament. So they were literally making up the process of running tournaments as they went along. And so, like, just the fact that they were doing it was amazing. But now we're a professional sport. Now we're PGA Light. Totally different world. And I'm not even going to say one's better or worse, because it was a lot of fun. It was so much fun.
So you probably got a lot of really fond memories of back in those days, huh?
Yeah, I mean, everything back then was great. So one of the things I'm always wary of is I have a pet peeve in general in life about older people that think it was better back in their day. Oh, music back in my day. Oh, movies back in my day. Like, oh, everything's better when you were younger. And I think the reality is it's just better to be younger. So, of course, food tastes better. Music sounds better. You were 20 years old listening to it. It's going to sound better than anything you listen to when you're 60, right? So I try to be very careful not to do that. And along with that, people ask me about the difference between the sport now and then. And I'll tell you right now that 97% of ways the sport's better now than it's ever been. You know, that like, I named 30 things about disc golf and 29 of them are better now. The only thing that was better back then was that because we were smaller, there was more of a family. It was more of a family. Like, nobody knew what we did. Nobody understood why we did it except each other. We were all misfits in some regard. Even the doctor that's out there playing disc golf was kind of antisocial because he's playing Frisbee golf and not ball golf, right? So there was something about this camaraderie of this really small outcast group that will never be the way it was. As much as they say disc golf's like a family now, it's like, no, I mean, yeah, but not like it was. But that's the only thing that was better back then. Everything else now is better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I kind of share that sentiment a little bit. Not obviously, like, not as much as you. I've been playing for 10 years, and it's like, man, like, it was so much different even just 10 years ago. So in like, tournaments didn't fill up in 10 minutes after registration opens, and you saw the same people. You would see the same people on Saturday, you know, and then you would see them Sunday, and then you'd see them at Wednesday league and stuff like that. And it's not, and I don't know, I don't want to say that it's worse. It's not worse. But, you know, you see a lot of people, every time I go to the disc golf course now, every time I play a league or a tournament, I see someone a lot of people that is like, I've never seen this person before. You know, that's just like the boom that it's had is it's invited so many people, and I don't know, it's just growing, you know, it's just an adjustment that you need to make.
And everything about that's good, because the more people that get to enjoy this game, the more happiness there is in the world, the more like there's nothing better than more people playing. You know, if you have to wait in the tee pad a hole or you can't get in a tournament, that's a small price to pay for, you know, an additional 9 million people enjoying disc golf. Yeah. I have no problem with any of those things. I think that's all better. I mean, that's what we like. This is what we dreamed about. We dreamed about 40 years ago. And, you know, we mistakenly kept thinking it was going to be next year. And next year, every year it got a little bigger, but it was very slow progression. It was a slow build until these last couple of years. Not slow, 10 to 15% growth per year, steady for 40 years. That's certainly not slow. If it was a mutual fund, like you'd be Warren Buffett, right? But this is what we wanted. We wanted this, and even the people that are complaining about it, the older players, if you had asked them 20 years ago if they want this, they would have said yes, every one of them.
I want to shift gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
When I think of Scott Stokely, I don't think of the disc golfer, Scott Stokely. I think of all of the things that you have done to raise awareness for autism. Naturally, talk about you started Blue Power events and eventually became known for the signature blue hair. Can you share the inspiration for starting the movement and kind of tell us what the response has been like over the past few years?
Yeah, so I wish I had some amazing altruistic story about where this all started, but it started because I was trying to impress a girl. By the way, I believe, I have no evidence of this, but I believe that a large percentage of great things that have happened in history have been to impress a girl. But I was dating a woman who had a son with autism, and I was watching how much she struggled, and I just wanted to do something for the autism community. And at the beginning, it didn't really hold an interest to me. I wasn't anti, it's just, it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't in my own bubble. My motives were to make her happy. And I started running special needs events. So whenever I'd run one of my clinics around the country, I would run a free class for kids and adults with special needs. I would teach them all how to disc golf. I would give them all discs, and then eventually shirts as well. I funded this all out of my own pocket. I wasn't a charity. I've never taken a penny in donations for any of this. In fact, when people ask if they can donate, I tell them, I don't deal with the money. I hate money. Send the money directly to a local organization. But we ended up splitting up. I don't know, after doing maybe 100 events or something like that. But at this point, it was at a point now, it got enough publicity where if I was coming down to run a tournament, I would start getting messages from parents of kids with special needs that would say, so what time's your event? And I eventually became just a part of the community, and it became something important to me that it now matters dearly. I care dearly for the people in the community now. I like to share that I didn't at the beginning because I think it's inhuman to always claim to have the best motives for everything and look how perfect I am. I've always been the best. No, it's I came across this through a very human way, but I learned something about myself that I liked, which is that I like this community. So I've now since run 281 events in 281 cities for kids and adults, not just autism. It started off as autism, and it's now special needs. And they were called Blue Power events. 2 years ago, when I went back out on tour, hit the road again, because of COVID, I wasn't comfortable doing these events, especially early on when we had no idea. Are you safe outdoors? Am I going to be a super spreader? I'm going from town to town to town. There was so much uncertainty. I said, there's no way I'm going to run these events right now. And, but it was bugging me because I really wanted to do something for the community. So this past April, actually on April 1st, even though this is not an April Fool's joke coincidence, I made the decision that I would donate all of my prize money that I won to a local special needs organization, often autism, but now special needs. What I do now when I go to tournaments is I give the tournament director the name of a local autism organization, and whatever I win, I don't touch money. That's the big thing. I never touch the money. Whatever I win at the tournament, the tournament director will send my prize money directly to that local organization. And I did this because I couldn't run the class for them or didn't feel comfortable. So I wanted to do something. So I'm officially an amateur. Basically, I no longer play for prize money. That includes ace pools. It includes skins. league night. I no longer accept cash. Everything I win goes to a local autism organization. And it's, you know, I'm not a 501c3. Like I said, I don't do fundraising. This is something I do because honestly, it makes me feel good.
Yeah,
And
I think it's an awesome legacy, man. I think it's really awesome.
Yeah, I enjoy it. And the thing is, I'm also in a position to do it because I do really well with my teaching, with my seminars. I got tour series discs coming out. I'm not struggling. Like, I'm far from struggling financially. So I am in a position to do it. You know, I wasn't doing this a few years back because I was counting on prize money to put gas in my tank to get to the next town. So, you know, I didn't do it when it hurt me to do so. I did it when I could afford it.
Yeah.
But now I can afford it, so I do it.
So I think it was maybe 2016. You were invited by Steve Dodge to bring Blue Power events to every date on the Pro Tour. So what did these events look like? And how did you balance teaching and practicing for high level tournaments like this?
So the classes, I was trying to get this thing off the ground, but it was very fly by night. It's never been a very organized thing, kind of on purpose, because I don't want it to turn into a job. I don't want it to turn into a, like, oh, you should get corporate sponsorship. I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. I just want to show up and teach kids how to play Frisbee golf. So balancing it's easy. It's just like, well, what do you do in your free time? Some people watch Netflix shows. Okay, well, instead of watching a Netflix show, I go run a class. You know, it's something that I enjoy. And by the way, I am doing it this year. I just sent a message to an adaptive sports facility in Las Vegas. So before the Las Vegas Challenge, I will be running a special needs class, and all my prize money, of course, is going to go to that organization as well. So I'll be doing it this year. One thing I'm excited about on the Pro Tour is that in every single Blue Power class, I'm going to drag several touring pros out to help. And I already came up with my plan for this because I know everybody gets really busy. So I'm going to ask them publicly in social media if they would volunteer, so they really can't say no.
I love it. I love it.
And yes, I know exactly what I'm doing when I do this. But it's something that I want to do. So I would expect every top level touring pro, MPO and FPO, it's at one point to come out to just once. I'm not going to ask them twice, but just one time this year, come out for 2 hours and help me with a class. I think they're going to find it's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's a great idea. Very calculated.
Oh yeah, no, I know what I'm doing. I mean, most people would say yes anyways, but I'm not giving them the opportunity to say yes. I mean, these are all going to be like at 10 a.m., 2 days before the tournament. It's, you know, you have time. You have 90 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. We'll kind of shift gears here again a little bit.
Yeah.
In 2020, you published a book, Scott Stokely, Growing Up Disc Golf. Not many disc golfers can say that they wrote a book, that they're the author. You do so many different things off the course, and I think that's really awesome. What inspired you to write a book?
All right. So first off, my plan, my entire life, from the time I was a kid, is that I wanted to live a life that I felt was worth writing a book about. You know, whether it's for good or bad, I'm going to go for it in life. And it's going to be a story. My life will not be I'm just not a 9-to-5 suburbs kind of guy. Like, I want to live an interesting life. So I talked about it, but a lot of people talk about writing books and, you know, things like that. I'd written a couple books before for different sports, but the scope of this one was much larger. So what happened was I took a couple years off from competing. Well, I still competed locally, but traveling, and I was selling software up in Fort Collins, Colorado, doing really well. I lost my job there, and the only job I could get in the tech field was in Denver, which was an hour each way commute. And that was my options. It was either that or take, like, you know, a $70,000 cut in pay and work at Burger King or something. I don't know. Like I didn't have options. There were only so many tech jobs, tech sales jobs in Fort Collins. So since I was going to be in the car, 10 hours a week, I was like, I got to do something productive with this time. I'm not going to waste this time listening to music or just watching, wrestling shoot interviews or something like that. Like, I want to be productive with the time. And so I came up with the idea. I said, well, what if I wrote my book in a microphone, and then I could get a co-author that would transcribe what I wrote. And I had actually co-authored 2 books with him before, Aaron Rath. And he's very good at taking my words and getting rid of all the repeating myself. And like, he doesn't change my words or my context. He's just very good at taking my words and putting them in print. And he was all for the idea. So I just mapped out my entire life, initially as a series of anecdotes that started from when I was a little kid, just basically stories, individual stories. And, like 60 of them that were kind of the biggest things in my life. And I just narrated each of them and sent them to him, and he put them down. When we were done, he'd written about 225,000 words.
Wow.
And no, 125,000 words. And it was funny. I'm actually about to make a video about this, telling the whole story, but it was awful. Not because of him, but it wasn't a book. It was a series of anecdotes that it wasn't a story. And true story. I told him, I read it. I said, look, you did a really good job, but we're not doing this. This is awful. I can't put my name on this. And he's actually published like 12 books. So he said, no, this is step 1 of the process. He goes, we're like 18 months away from publishing. He says, now the work starts. Go through it and do, make your revisions. And I went all the way through it, and I made all these revisions to it. And then I was like, well, it's still bad, but it's not terrible, but it's still bad. And he's like, perfect, do more revisions. I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude. Like, that took like 3 months. But I ended up going through start to finish 6 times. And
my goodness.
Oh yeah, no, it took a year. I mean, it was a major project, but every single time, like after like the 3rd time, I'm like, well, I guess it's okay. Still don't like it. But every time it got better. And then finally on the 6th revision, when I went through it, all I was catching was grammatical errors. Like, there was nothing else in there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is really good. But I'm objective about this because I thought it sucked for a year and a half. And as soon as that was done, then we sent it to some real editors. Dan Roddick, ironically, PDJ number 3 was one of the editors, among other people. And we sent it out to them. They did all the final edits, and we published. And it's done really, really well. It's got 5 stars on Amazon. The reviews have been fantastic, and yeah, kind of mind blown.
It's interesting.
That's pretty awesome.
I actually looked up your book because I was curious about it. And one of the first reviews I saw was actually from your ex-wife. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, great. What is she going to say? This is going to be interesting. And I don't remember the actual verbiage, but there was nothing bad about you, about the book, anything. And
No.
it's something I think I'm going to have to get my hands on on this book and read through it. I'm not really a book reader, but I might have to read it. It sounds...
So I did an audiobook last year. So there's an audiobook now. I just afterwards message me. I'll send you a link. I'll send you a copy. I'll send you guys copies.
Okay.
That'd be
awesome.
I read it, and I think it turned out pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it.
So you went through with your own voice and you read out the whole book. You did the audiobook?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, so that's an interesting story as well, because I learned a lot about that. So Will McCaskill, the Last Cash podcast, if you're familiar with him, in Nashville, and Marcus Rogers in his studio, their studio, I did the reading. And the first thing I did is I actually read through start to finish either 2 or 3 times with Adriana, where she sat in front of me and I read the entire book to her, with her just going, slow down, enunciate more, and just correcting me. And so I got better at reading, because it seems easy, like you're just reading, but it's a lot harder than I thought. And so when we went to the studio, which this completely surprised me, but we would only get to do like 5 to 10 pages in an evening. Yeah, like I thought it would be pretty simple, but basically anytime we made a mistake, we stopped and went back to the beginning of the paragraph. But mistakes weren't like just mispronunciations. Like you can say a sentence that if you look back, you'll say, why did you put a comma after that word? Well, there's no comma in the book there, but when I spoke it, I paused and the context changed. And so I went back and we went back and basically 5 to 10 pages a day. We went into the studio several hours a day for 2 weeks in order to do the entire book. And when it was done, I listened to it and I said, it's awful. We need to scrap it. We can't do this. No, again, true story. I said, honestly, I didn't think I did a horrible job, but it's certainly not. I've listened to a lot of audiobooks and it is not audiobook quality. And then Will McCaskill said, I need a couple months on this. He says that's the way it works. And he spent several months getting rid of breath noises, getting rid of not a lot of ums, but if there were. One of the things, this is real interesting, like I never thought about this before, because when you read an audiobook, you don't notice what's going on behind the scenes. But things like an identical time space in between paragraphs makes the book flow. Well, when you're reading and re-recording, that's not where it starts. It's very choppy. So he had to make sure that there was an identical time space between each paragraph, between each chapter, between the little things like that. And there were times when my mouth might have been an inch farther away from the microphone, but you would notice listening. So he had to raise the audio for 11 minutes. He's a master. And he took what was, I think, okay and made it very good. But I didn't do a very good job. I did an okay job. And then several months of work is, I love that guy, man. He made it good.
I could not imagine doing something like that because I stumble on my words when I'm reading to my 4-year-old at night. I'm stumbling over, I'm reading Dr. Seuss and I'm getting all jumbled up on my words. So yeah, definitely kudos to you, man. You definitely put the work in, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to attach my name to something that I wasn't proud of because I would be embarrassed. Like it had to be something. Here's the part that tripped me out though. So you want to talk about mind blown. So I start getting the reviews, right? The reviews start coming in. They're all good. And I'm like, well, of course they're good. These are my friends. Like, what are they going to do? Like a lot of the people writing reviews are in the book. So I'm getting these good reviews. I mean, I appreciate them. They make me feel good. But is the book really good? I don't know, because it's being read. I mean, it's a disc golf book being read by disc golfers. Of course, they're going to enjoy the history of disc golf and like all this stuff. So I had no idea that it was good, right? Then I get contacted by bookreview.com. And they want my book submitted to be in there. It's an international competition. Like bookreview.com actually has an award ceremony in Miami every year, a banquet, people fly in, it's a black tux affair. Like it's like the real deal, at least from the best of my understanding. It's an international awards, and they want me to submit my book under the category autobiography. And I'm like, I honestly was like, okay, I kind of did it. Well, Adriana submitted it for me, but almost kind of like, I'm just curious because this is going to be a non-disc golfer reading my book. And it ended up getting a silver medal. And yeah, I got second place, like against other like real authors. But here's the mind-blowing part that totally like, I still think this is hilarious. So it's best autobiography, right? The woman who won was a woman who was, she was in communist Russia, the Soviet Union, had to like crawl over barbed wire fences, across minefields through 3 Eastern Bloc countries over 6 months before getting packed into like, hidden into like a container where she spent 6 weeks in the hull of a boat, getting to America to find her freedom and find democracy and capitalism and like whatever this, like that won first place. Second place, a book about a kid growing up playing Frisbee golf. Like this, that's weird. Right? And, but it was because the person that read it was like, basically said, I didn't know what to think about a book about Frisbee golf. holy cow, this thing was really good. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I cried. Like that was because that was the first mainstream recognition where I went, okay, now I actually believe it was good. I didn't really know if it was good until that moment.
Yeah, you said you were up against you said real authors. Well,
Yes,
you're a real author. You're a real author. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I technically I am, but yeah, I mean, I'm not kidding myself. I mean, it's not.
You're an author in my eyes. All right.
I did that, but I was still like I was blown away. So, anyways, the next book is the first draft is basically done.
Ooh.
For the next book, although that means we're probably a year to 2 years out from actually having it there, but it's going to happen. Another book's coming.
That's
Cool.
awesome.
So in the description of your current book that's out, it mentions things like being an addict, being a fugitive, having a rough life, really. To kind of tie things together between the book and the sport, do you feel like the disc golf helped you change that behavior and become who you are?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it gave me a focus in life where I could take my addictive personality and put it into something that wasn't harmful. I did a lot of like when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, from age like 17 to 19, I was using drugs pretty hard. Kind of fell out of disc golf a little bit. I was still playing, but I certainly wasn't playing at any level that was competitive, even though I'd been successful the previous years. And by the way, by rough life, I mean incredibly self-imposed. I mean rough life in the suburbs. So it's the perspective there. Like there are a lot of people. If I complained about my rough life, would just like they would laugh at it.
Right.
But as in, but depression and insecurities and addiction and things like that were a real part of my life as a teenager. And getting into disc golf was it wasn't the only thing that got me out of it, but it was definitely a springboard to it. I mean, it was a focus in my life. It was a big part of it was just being around quality people in the sport. I didn't really have a family. I had my mom. I didn't have basically any other family. So the people in the sport that I looked up to have always been my family to me. And so that was as much them as the sport itself.
I can't say I've had issues with like the addictions and all that, but I've definitely struggled with mental health and depression, and I found that disc golf for me personally is a huge avenue for coping and getting over that and being able to deal with it and move on with life.
Yeah, our brains are assholes.
Yeah.
Our brains are our best friends and our worst enemy at the same time, and we don't have control over. Like we have control, we have control over our actions, but we don't have control over what our brain's telling us to do. And our brains lie to us. I mean, depression's a perfect example of this. Your brain's telling you something that isn't true, but how do you not listen to your own brain? It's like mental health's a real thing, and it's been. I think every year it's getting easier, especially for men. I think that that is an area. I know you're not supposed to say that there's a different world for men and women in 2022. I don't care. Mental health is one of those things that I think has been far less accepting among the male community that is becoming more accepting, especially among people who are younger, where you can actually talk about mental health issues. Before it was, my God, if you talked about mental health issues when I was growing up, you'd get the crap beat out of you by other guys.
Yeah.
Like literally, like that's
Yeah.
you just my God, if you ever like cried in front of your friends, like your friends would like punch you for crying. So like that's changed clearly for the better. That's why I'm so open about it. Like I'm not ashamed of it. I've had ups and downs in my life, and I'm not ashamed of any of it. I mean, I might regret some things, but I'm not ashamed.
Right. So we're gonna move forward with this a little bit, maybe bring more of a positive feel, if you will. Because talking about depression just kind of has its own sense of bringing you down, if you will. It's got like that negative tone to it. But you've decided to return to the touring life. And
Yes.
so far, what is the biggest challenge you've had to overcome?
I would say, I really haven't had any big challenges to overcome yet because the tour hasn't started. Everything I've laid out as far as my plan, and I didn't know it would work out this way going in, but when I laid out my game plan, get in shape, get my body rating, get my sponsors, get my, do all the training, I didn't know that it would go well, and everything has actually gone perfectly here. So I don't have the challenges, but there's certainly going to be challenges because I'm going to be competing against the very best in the world. Most of them many years younger than me. So as much as I say I haven't really faced any challenges so far, I expect there to be quite a few. Starting in about 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, it's right around the corner.
Yeah.
We'll touch base a little more on the tour, but just real quick, last year you played an event in Grand Rapids, Michigan called the River City Open. Finished second.
Okay.
I actually played in that tournament as well, and I believe Brandon was there. Did you enjoy that event, and do you plan on playing this year?
That is the event where, is that the one where hole 17 is a par 4 with the road down the left side, and then 18 comes back with the road? Okay, that one.
Yep, that's Brewer Park.
Brewer Park, and that was Grand Rapids, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. No, I couldn't stand that event. I lost. No, I'm just kidding. No, I was really happy for. So as much as I want to win, I also enjoy watching my friends do well. I separate those two things: how I feel about what I do, and then watching other people. So I was disappointed because I always want to win. But Don Smith was there, and it was something really neat I got to watch happen because he got off to this hot start on the last round, and next thing you know, I was down by like 5 or 6 or something like that with like 9 holes to go, and then I caught fire, and I got to within a stroke of him going into hole 17, and he was melting down, right? And I'm not rooting for this to happen, but I'm down by a stroke with 2 to go, and I'm sure at this point I got to tournament 1. Not because I want the person to melt down, but when people start spiraling downwards, they get in their heads. I just watch the wheels fall off. And again, I can't stress this enough. This does not make me happy to watch, but it's what I've seen. And I saw that happening to him. And then I watched him throw one of the most clutch shots where he put the entire tournament on the line. He threw it. He doesn't really have a sidearm, and he threw his approach shot out of bounds from his lie from like 300 feet out. But if he messes up, he's not just taking a stroke. He's effectively re-throwing tournaments over. He's not going to get a stroke on me in 18, period. I win the tournament. And he went for it and he executed. And it made me so happy because I like watching that story unfold. And I like Don. He's a friend of mine. And then on the last hole, it was great because I was so touched by this, but he made his putt to win and he just yells top of his lungs. He's like, I beat Scott Stokely. And that was a big deal. It was an accomplishment, and which made me flattered that he looks at me that way because he's a very good golfer. If we play 10, I'm not going to beat him 10 out of 10. He's a good player, very good player. So it wasn't that. It was just that it meant something to him, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. But I won't be back this year because it just doesn't fit in the schedule. I'll be at CCR though.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah, CCR. I can't wait to play that. That's the tournament, by the way, where I shot like a 10:39 round, and Jeff Babbitt shot like a 10:79 in MP50. The hell's up with that?
Goodness.
What course was that? Was that on River's Edge or Renegades Trail?
The wooded one.
Oh, River's Edge. Yep.
Yeah, I shot like 9 under or something on that wooded course. Like I shredded that course like a 10:30 something round. 10:35, 10:39 or something, and he beat me by like 3 or 4 strokes. He shot the course record. I'm like, what's the guy got to do? Like, okay, when you play MP50, 1039 rounds are supposed to be good enough. Like on the pro tour, no. But in my division, in that division, yeah, I was kind of like, Jesus Christ, dude, he's so good, but damn.
Yep. That's kind of like, I feel like that's kind of like where disc golf is headed now. You know what I mean? Like you got to shoot rounds like that to win tournaments these days because the field is just getting better.
Oh yeah. I mean, 1030 something just means, you're solid in the cash now, but you're not winning tournaments on the pro tour, not even close. But I have plans. I have plans to do better than that.
So speaking of plans and tours and events and stuff like that, and your goals, you kind of answered this already, but what are your goals for 2022?
I want to win worlds. That would be my number one goal above everything else. That would trump everything. Barring that, I want to perform well. I want to win tournaments. And I don't know how satisfied I'll be if I don't win. I mean, if I, it could be that if I break the top 10 twice, that I look back in 5 years and I'm super proud of that. But I won't be at the time. If I break top 10 at a tournament this year, I'm going to think, Jesus Christ, that's 2 putts around away from competing to win.
Yeah.
I won't be satisfied at the time. Like in hindsight, finishing second to Climb Out Worlds twice, I'm super proud of. But at the time, I cried like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So it's perspective is a different thing. But my goal is to win. My goal is always going to be to win. I'm playing the big money skins match at Eagles Crossing.
Ooh.
Did you guys hear about that?
No,
I watched the skins match. GK Pro did the skins match. I think Eagle, Sexton. Yep. I watched that one. That course looks immaculate.
Yeah. So this year is they're doing it again, and it's going to be far bigger. It's going to be the biggest skins match in the history of disc golf, and I was invited to be one of the 4 players.
Really? So that's amazing.
Yeah. It's going to be me, Eagle, Calvin, and Brody.
Pretty stacked.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. But just the fact that I was invited, I was so flattered. There's no words. There's so many good players to be asked to be part of the biggest skins match in history. And it's not like a seniors event where they're inviting me, Ken, Barry, and Ron or something like that. That would have made sense. But, to invite me out with those guys really, I was touched by it very much.
You might have just answered my next question. I was going to ask you what event you're looking forward to the most this year. Well,
next to Worlds is going to be that one. And I am playing, I told the tournament director, they've already got $11,800 in skins money raised. It's going to be a lot more than that. That's where they're at right now. It's going to be significantly more, but they're only announcing 11,000. And I told the tournament director when he asked me to play, I said, I'll play, but you need to send any skins I win. That money is going to go to an autism organization. So there's in Farmington, Missouri, there's an organization called Hope for Autism that takes adults with autism and other special needs and teaches them basic job skills to integrate them into the community so they can work. And all the skins I win is going to go to them. So I hope I win every one of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're really good. Hope for Autism in Farmington. I last year I won the tournament in Farmington, and that's where my money went last year as well. They're really great. They're doing really good work.
Cool. That's highly respectable that you give so much back to a special needs community just in general. And I really applaud that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, here's something that I really truly believe. You can work hard and you can do things to accomplish things in life, but you also have to be dealt a good hand. There's luck involved. Like the most successful person in the entire world, if they were raised by an alcoholic, abusive single mother or single father, Are they going to turn out to be successful in life? Very possibly not. And so, like, I was dealt the best hand in the entire world. I really was. And so I feel lucky. So other people haven't been dealt the same hand I have. I don't think it's that weird to want to level that playing field, or, whatever I can do. It just seems like a thing you should do. Well, for me, thing I should do. I can't speak for other people, but
Right.
makes perfect sense.
So we're gonna move forward a little bit to a segment that I created called Pro Tips.
All right.
And Pro Tips are brought to you by Hazy Shade Disc Golf and more. Go to hazyshade.com and check out their selection of discs, hats, bags, and other accessories you need on the course. So last week we had Eric Oakley, and I talked about building or sticking to your game plan. This week I'm actually going to feed off the same subject, and that is when you are preparing for tournaments, whether it be through your practice rounds or mentally getting ready. What things do you do to make sure, or what things do you make sure and take note of? Do you use pen and paper or caddy book, or do you take notes on a smart device?
No, so I don't take notes, mainly because, like, I've grown up in the sport. Like I before the tournament starts, I know every single hole, the ins and outs of it. What I do is I try to play mathematical golf. I'm a big math guy. Math trumps everything. And so every single hole, I try to figure out what is the best mathematical approach to that hole. If I played that hole an infinite number of times, doing different shots, which one yields the lowest score on average? Now, there are times when you don't follow the math. There are situations where you would make decisions not to do that. But overall, I try to play the best mathematical game. There's no such thing as having an aggressive round, a conservative round. There's no game plan. It's every single shot, what is the best math? And I want to be the casino, not the player at the table thinking they're going to beat the casino. And that's the approach I take with everything. And I think it trumps everything. I played, I think, near perfect mathematical golf. My skill level's not perfect, obviously. At every 3 tournaments I've ever played, I've lost. But I don't lose because I'm making very many bad decisions. So that's what it is decisions I have control over. I don't have control over the outcome of a shot working or not.
Brandon,
I would say 80. Yeah, I was just going to say, I would say that 84 career wins kind of shows that your approach is working. I'd say it's a pretty solid approach.
It works. Well, so I'll give you an example though. So I will not be playing mathematically perfect golf on the tour because the more mathematically sound golf you play, the smaller the variance. Meaning, if you're playing mathematically sound golf, you're going to play, on average, a much higher percentage of the time closer to your average. Like, when you play mathematically correct golf, you're rarely going to shoot 6 strokes better or 6 strokes worse than your average. Like, you're going to be pretty close to your average. If your name is Paul, Eagle, Ricky, or Calvin, you can play mathematically sound golf and win a pro tour event because your skill level is that high. When you are not as good of a player, there are situations where you have to play incorrect mathematics. Even though in the long run you won't score as high, you need to create a larger variance for yourself. That if I play this way, I'm usually going to play on average 2 strokes worse, but every once in a while I'm going to play 8 strokes better than my average. Where mathematically sound golf, you can only play 4 strokes better than your average. And you take your lumps because you're going to take a lot of bad rounds for it, but occasionally you're going to get that 8-stroke variance on the positive. And so that's going to be necessary. So one of the things I'm doing on tour this year is, in order to win tournaments, I can't play conservative. I'm not good enough to play conservative golf. I have to play effectively hyper aggressive early in a tournament. And if I don't get off to a good start, which I'll know after 9 holes or certainly after a round, if I don't get off to a good start, I'm not going to play triple hyper conservative and catch up. At that point, I'm just going to play mathematically sound golf. I'm going to try to make sure I cash, raise some money for charity, finish in the cash. That's going to be just fine. But if I do happen to get off to a good start, then I can make decisions based on the fact that, hey, now we only have 3 rounds to go. That's a much smaller sample size. I'm a couple off the lead with 3 rounds to go. Maybe I can play a different type of game, but I won't ever be in that position if I play conservative. Like, I'm not good enough. Like, literally, Paul can play conservative, drop a couple circle 2 putts in that he wouldn't have normally made and shoot a 1068 round. Paul can do that. I can't. So I play mathematically sound golf, but I will carefully choose when not to, especially this year. By the way, back when I'm playing MP50, like, I'm usually in that role where I can just play conservative and just coast. Not not this year. I don't have that luxury. Not even close.
That's good advice, and it makes you think about your round a lot different than, I have to throw this shot here and I have to throw that shot there. You know, you're playing shot to shot, but what's the highest probability of playing or throwing a good shot?
Every time you got to play the correct math. I mean, again, with that, there's exceptions, but barring those specific exceptions, you always want to play mathematically sound. You know, you throw 72 drives. I mean, you can win 6 hands of blackjack, but you're going to have a very hard time winning 36 hands of blackjack 72 times, because the odds are slightly against you 72 times. The odds are very unlikely that you're going to be even 50-50. You will average below average because you're playing mathematically. You're not playing mathematically sound activity. You're just, by the fact that you're sitting at a blackjack table, you're not playing mathematically sound life. So 72 is way too long to come out ahead playing wrong. But, you know, that's what I was saying. There's situations where that changes. The other situation, of course, is at the end of a tournament. You know, you're down by X number of strokes with X number of holes. I mean, yeah, then there's a time to take risks as well, or a time to play extra conservative, either one. So, but I like math. I'll always follow up on.
We've got time for a couple fan questions, and I threw out on social media trying to get some to ask you. Brandon,
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead and kick it off, Brandon.
So we've had a question. What are your thoughts on course design and difficulty? Specifically, do you feel the best way to increase difficulty is through lengthening holes?
I think it's one of them. I think that anything that makes that challenges skill levels. I think there's been a misunderstanding, not as much now as there used to be, but a lot of times players considered throwing accurate a skill and throwing far just something some people did. Where throwing far is a skill no different than throwing accurate, throwing rollers, playing smart, a strong mental game. They're all skills. So the way you increase difficulty, yes, you can increase length, but then you also narrow fairways. You add out of bounds. You add more, trickier greens. So I think you do all those things. Smaller baskets are a potential someday.
That was something I was going to throw that in there. Was what did you think about smaller baskets?
Yeah, I think smaller baskets are good. Now they have to be basically more narrow and shorter as well, because like if you look at a basket like more like the bullseye baskets that are just narrow. If you put those baskets out on the course right now, huge advantage to push putters, huge disadvantage to spin putters, just by the nature of the mechanics of the putt, right? It would be very unfair. So, but if you made it narrower and shorter, I think that's fine. I was on Chain Clankers last night talking about this, and there's precedent in other sports for the top pros playing a different game. I've heard in ball golf that the greens that the pros play on the PGA Tour, like you couldn't put those on a recreational course because people would just hate it. Like they're impossible. I have firsthand experience at this in bowling, that if you use the PBA oil patterns on lanes, bowlers who are averaging 210 in league are going to be bowling 170s. Like the pros play oil patterns that are just on a whole different world. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that for disc golf, where the pros are going to play a type of golf that the recreational player either doesn't play, or if they do go out to Eagles Crossing to play, they go out there and they shoot 100 and they're satisfied. I like harder. I personally don't like seeing double-digit under pars. I would love to see a few under par be a good round. I would love to see holes. So I've watched videos of Eagles Crossing, and it seems like the majority of those holes, if you par them, you're not pissed off.
Yeah.
I mean, you still need to shoot under par to compete. I mean, probably a fair amount under par, but oh boy, God, there's so much trouble on those holes. Like, you earn your pars, and I think I personally prefer that. I like harder. I don't like deuce or die. I hate that.
Yeah. Another fan question I have is from Dayton Disc Golf Club president Brian. He says, "I've heard have made it to Dayton a few times now. How was your experience? And do you remember throwing a disc at Belmont Park from 18's basket up the hill past the tee pad?"
Okay, so first off, I love Dayton, but I also love everywhere. I was very good friends with Steve Weisskopf, technically still friends, although we haven't talked in a very long time. I have so much respect for Steve. And I've always had good experiences in Dayton. Dayton's fantastic. Dayton was one of the hotbeds of disc golf back in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't one of the major hotbeds, but it was certainly a place where disc golf was happening. I think to this day, Hazy Shade Disc Golf Pro Shop is the best pro shop I've ever been to. I love it out there. I made an entire video about it, about Hazy Shade. Hazy Shade is brilliant. So, yeah. And as far as a shot, I don't remember it. I love that other people remember these shots. Back when I was doing, I invented the traveling throwing clinic. Back in the 90s, I went to 220 cities before any other touring pro had traveled to one, to do these traveling throwing clinics. And so I was doing these throwing clinics, and back in the 90s, I threw 100 feet farther than the second farthest thrower on tour. There were some actual distance throwers they were my peers as far as distance, for sure. But among the top touring golfers, I had 100 feet on everybody. So whenever I went to these clinics, I was always throwing shots that no one had ever seen before, virtually every time. And I always thought that was, people bring that up to me. I'll tell you, one of the biggest compliments I ever got, I was so flattered by this. But I went out to, this is like 4 years ago or something like that. I don't remember where it was. I wish I did. Might have been in Iowa. But anyways, I went out to, I ran one of my clinics out there, and we're playing around. I'm walking the course, and there's this one hole. It's like a 600-foot hole or something like that. And as we're walking the course, the guy says, "Here, check this out." And we get down the fairway up somewhere near the basket, and he uses his foot to wipe off a stone, and engraved in a stone was Scott Stokely's drive landed here. So, yeah, put a marker down where my shot landed.
That's amazing.
How cool is that?
It's so cool. I am. It means a lot to me when people recognize things that I've done. Like you're not supposed to say that, "Oh, that makes me feel good," or "I like the praise." And I think that's so stupid. I love it. I never. God, the minute something like that isn't a big deal to me, then I probably should be looking for other work. It means a lot to me that they did that. And then it left a mark on the community. I did actually an interview with a guy at, oh God, I can't remember where it was. Adriana's overhearing the guy that cried when he was talking about. Do you remember the guy that cried in the pro shop? Oh. Yeah, I can't remember where it was. But, Knoxville, Tennessee. It was in Knoxville. And he said that, so I'm just earlier, just last year, I'm shooting a video of him talking about the clinic. that I did out there, like in 1993 or something like that, or no, 95, 96. But he's telling the story. I'm sitting right next to him just like a year ago, and he's saying that he was sitting next to the other like kind of like pro in town, and they watched me throw. And he says he looks over at his friend, and his friend was crying. And as he's telling me the story just last year, he starts crying. And he says, we had never seen anything like that. We didn't know that that was possible. Like you showed us this level that we didn't even know existed. And he said, he goes, my buddy was crying. He was like wiping his tears away. Like, but he's telling me the story crying. And I'm like, I'm trying not to cry. I'm like, gee, like that was 25 years ago or 27 years, no, 25 years ago. And he's still emotional over it. Like, God, if that's not a big deal to me, like, I'm like, I don't know, something. I'm a sociopath or something.
Yeah. So we were talking about, throwing distance and stuff like that, making holes longer. I have one final question for you before I give the tee pad to Mark and we kind of wrap this thing up. You're putting with the Berg, right?
Yes.
How long did it take you to get used to putting with the Berg?
Very quickly. I started putting in it and it started going in. I made a video about choosing your putter, and I will never tell anybody the Berg is the best putter in the world, because the thing about a putter, it's real simple. You need a disc that leaves your hand the exact same way every single time. Because if it leaves your hand the exact same way every single time, you get a consistent release. Then you remove the variable. You remove this randomness of sometimes it pulls right, sometimes it wobbles. Once you remove that variable, you have all these other variables. You have your hips, your shoulder, your elbow, your distance, your wind. But you've removed the variable of what the disc is going to do out of your hand. Any putter that leaves your hand consistently is a good putter for you. So when I putted, I'm sorry, I forgot one key part of this, is there cannot be a best putter for everybody because our hands are different. Mm-hmm. Like our fingers are different lengths. The disc will sit in our hands in different spots. So, a Warden might come out of your hand great, but not mine. But you should putt the Warden. Just because I'm putting the Luna doesn't mean the Warden, or whatever. So the Berg came out of my hand consistent every time, and I went, that's my putter. But that doesn't mean it's the only good putter, or it's the best putter for me though.
Scott, how did you know that I'm putting with the Warden? You got some sort of psychic something going on here? Because I'm putting with the Warden right now. I just thought that was really funny.
Yeah, I do my research.
Awesome.
All right, so
no,
go ahead.
Yeah, the way I teach disc golf is I never teach that this is how I do it. That's how you should do it. That's stupid. I don't say stupid. I mean, you got to start somewhere. There's a bunch of YouTube videos. Here's how I throw farther. Here's how I do this. Stupid's not there. That's unfair. But it's inexperienced. It's an inexperienced way of teaching. I teach there are fundamentals that you must do. Everyone must do. You have to throw with an X step. You got to keep your wrist straight, blah, blah. Like there's things you must do. But then there are other areas that aren't musts, that do vary from person to person based on body type, your flexibility, your body shape, where your muscle mass is, scar tissue, injuries, where you're most coordinated. That does not mean you can just throw any way you want to. Like the idea that you can just figure out what works for you and do it is foolish. Like there's a right way to throw. There are certain rules. Like, well, what about putting with non-putters? People ask me. And my answer is no, you got to putt with putters, because you can't have a disc that flies so far past the basket that you're going to miss comeback putts, which force you to putt slower. When you putt slower, the disc drops too much, which means it doesn't keep the right height long enough. Like, no, putters, you got to putt with. Like, so that you have to do. But what putter varies. You have to aim with your follow through. But that doesn't mean you need to do a spin putt or a push putt or a spush putt. They're all good putts. but you must aim with your follow through. You know, like there's rules, but also variables.
All right, one final question before we wrap this up.
Baby blue. You're asking about my eyes, the color of my beautiful eyes.
Yep, they're baby. All right, he answered the question. Show's over.
All right.
Thank you, Scott.
Question.
If you were not a professional disc golfer, what other career would you have most likely pursued?
Oh, God, that's a good question. I would be an entrepreneur. I would work for myself. I would be working for myself. God. Oh God, I would probably try to figure out how to be a nomad, and how I could make a living traveling. Certainly in the era of YouTube, I would be a content provider. In fact, I'm just about to launch my travel channel right now on YouTube, my adventure travel channel. But something where I didn't have a home. Now, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that 25 years ago, but well, that's not exactly true. I toured for years, so I wasn't as firm on being homeless as I am now. But God, that's a great question. I've never actually really pondered. I've never actually thought, what else would I do? I was an internet entrepreneur. I created 8 internet businesses from scratch when I was away from disc golf that I created from scratch, got profitable and sold. I like creating businesses, but I don't want to think about not playing Frisbee.
I get
That's
that.
awesome.
So
yeah, how about this? Be dead if I wasn't playing, because I can't imagine doing anything else. I really can't.
There you go.
I like that answer too. You know, but
right,
entrepreneur, that was like the perfect Scott Stokely answer for like all the things that you do off of the course and stuff like that. Entrepreneur, I think you like hit the nail on the head with that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. This is how I wound up going on tour. Or one of the things that this was the moment in my life that changed everything. I've never thanked the person for it, but he kind of played a part. So after, in my late teens, after, dabbling or whatever, not more than dabbling in drugs, but I got clean and I did what you're supposed to do. I went to college, and I did a couple years of college, got straight A's. After dropping out of high school in the 10th grade, I went to college and got straight A's. I was like doing well. And I was in my 3rd semester of college, and I was playing disc golf tournaments on the weekends. This is in Northern California. And there was a tournament coming up a couple months away. And I had earned a day off. Like every couple months, every 2 months of work, you earn like 1 day off or something, whatever corporate policy. I was working at Kinko's graveyard shift. And so I went to my boss and I said, hey, I need this Friday off, like in 2 months. And, because I had a tournament that weekend. And he gives me the 3rd degree. Like, he's like, oh my God, you're a graveyard employee. We can't, you know how hard it is to fill the graveyard spot? And I'm like, yeah, but this is a paid day off I've earned. Like, what do you, like, it's not a sick day, it's a vacation day. I earned, and he's like, oh, and he's giving me this total guilt trip, trying to get me to not take this day off. And I'm arguing with this guy to get my day off. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, I don't give a shit about Kinko's. I care about disc golf. I don't care about Kinko's. And finally he submits, or whatever. He kind of had to. It was a corporate job. He finally said, fine, we'll give you the day off, but you've really put me in a position, whatever. It was a horrible experience. And I walked out of the business that day, and I thought to myself, if I stay in college, I'm going to be doing the exact same thing I just did. It's going to be for more money. It's not going to look like that, but ultimately it is. I'm going to be subservient to some other person is going to have control over my life, some other adult. And that just I found that something that I couldn't stomach. And that's basically when I decided to go on tour. I was like, I got to go out on tour. I got to go play Frisbee. And I made the decision, not that day, but I made the decision. I quit. I finished the semester of college to go on tour for 3 months.
Oh no.
And that's what you have to. And so I went out for 3 months and I toured. And at the end of the tour, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh no, like I'm in deep, deep trouble. Like I can never go back to that. Like I just played Frisbee for a living for 3 months. I was eating at gas stations and ramen noodles, sleeping on floors, but I survived playing Frisbee and I survived not working for someone else. And I was like, what am I going to do? And then my whole life since then has been figuring out how not to go back and take that job again where someone else had control over my life. It was a big deal. Like I said, I've never thanked him for it, but had he been nicer, I might have gone back to work at the end of the tour.
Well, one last thing, real quick. Guys, if you like our content, please check out our online store at theunderstablepodcast.myspreadshop.com. And Scott, we thank you so much for taking time out of your day to
Of course, man.
join us.
Great, loved it.
And chat for the last hour and a half about disc golf, man.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Good luck with the show. And it means the world to me. We'll see you guys at Idlewild.
We should be there. At least I'll be there. Is the plan.
I'll be there.
So.
All right. See you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.